social security reform with self-control preferences. This is the agenda we are going to follow, and this paper, this study, wants to analyze the welfare implication of social security, of an hybrid social security reforms. It means social security reforms which are partially or fully funded. The urgent need of a reform on social security is related to the huge monetary cost related to the presence and the administration of an unfunded social security system, such as the pay-as-you-go system, and the increasing aging rate of the population make the basic pension financed plain unfeasible. The most important results that we achieved through this study is that when the temptation preferences are severe, the elimination scenario, so a scenario in which there is no social security reform, loses ground to an hybrid social security system. In particular, we can see that later that an hybrid system which provides higher benefits at retirement, higher expected utility, and if it exists, it provides any kind of social insurance, such as the longevity insurance, is preferred to the social security system, which provide only a better protection against self-control problems, so against the temptation issue. So that's because our analysis focus on the function of the social security system, an hybrid social security system, under self-control preferences. We take as a benchmark of our analysis the standard basic financed pension plan, which is an unfunded system, under the standard, so the constant relative risk aversion preferences. We take a brief look at the differences between unfunded and funded system, and they imply their different mechanism imply a different risk savings property, because even if the unfunded system is more redistributive, is less savings incentive, because through the mechanism it follows, agents are disincentivized to save, because the tax collected from the current generation are used to pay out the benefits at the retirement for the older generation, while and it is in the benefits in the case of unfunded system are linked to a lifetime average income of an employer agents. So it doesn't take into account the history of the employer agent, while it is taken account in the funded system, where higher income agents are provided with higher benefits. Both systems are implemented by the government and follow a lump sum transfer pension mechanism. We briefly look at the five different social security reform proposals, and we will see that they are a kind of combination between the unfunded social security system and funded social security system, except for the last two cases, the third and the fourth reform proposals, which doesn't take in account the unfunded social security systems. For what concern we depart from standard personal savings accounts, which postulates which postulates an exchange between the standard finance pension plan and a two-tier scheme, which is combined by the first part, which is an unfunded system, pay as you go, and second tier, which is the personal savings account. The personal savings account with annuitization differs from the personal savings account only by the fact that the funds accumulated in the personal savings account are annuitized at each stage of agent's life. For what concerns the last scenario, we have the elimination scenario, which implies a complete remove of any social security reform. The model works under the assumption of self-control preferences, but before talking about self-control preferences, we analyze the importance of the role of the time-inconsistent preferences, because agents in this case face the first utility function, and the key factor is given by delta, where delta is the discount factor and is the rate at which agents trade future consumption with current consumption. By increasing delta, increase the disutility of the current consumption. So there is an evidence about the strong implication of on the optimal policy, because the future agent's behavior will deviate the prescribed early optimal policy. To contrast this time-consistent problem, Galler and Wissendorfer elaborated kind of function which are consistent in time. The self-control preferences utility function. In this case, the function that agents maximize is composed by the standard or commitment utility function and temptation utility function. When the set of choice is singleton, the temptation function annihilates, while when we have more consumption choice, we can see that the agents face each period a kind of consumption savings problem, because agents are tempted to overconsume all their wealth in the earliest stage of retirement, so to resist to this temptation, they incur in a kind of self-control cost. We can say so that the social security system reforms, so this hybrid system, plays now the role of mitigating this self-control cost. The model is so organized that we can focus on the two temptation utility function forms, because the first one is the so-called power utility function, because it emphasizes the straightness of the temptation through lambda and rho. Lambda is the share in temptation function, where rho is the risk lower parameter. As rho increases, as lambda and rho increase, also the importance of the current the current consumption increase, while the second temptation utility function provides a direct relation between the temptation function and the standard temptation function, which is the constant relative risk aversion utility function. And it emphasizes the weakness of the temptation by choosing lambda, a lower value of lambda. After that, the most important part is the borrowing, is the budget constraint, which in this case combine the budget constraint and another kind of constraint, which is the borrowing constraint, because we know that agents face kind of liquidity problem since they are tempted to borrow against their future income. This borrowing is negatively correlated with savings, and so in order to reduce this kind of borrowing, we introduce borrowing constraints given by alpha j and alpha j minus 1, according to the age of retirement. To this budget constraint. Eta represents the accidental bequest if it exists. So if agents die before the retirement age, in this case, eta can lead to a larger welfare improvement because it is equally redistributed to all the members of the economy in a lump sum fashion. Here we have more technical aspect of the fiscal policy of the social security reform proposals. All the systems are implemented by governments, and we can see that the first, the pay-as-you-go system, which is the unfunded system, is self-financing, and because people pay a payroll tax on social security system. Yes, the main important differences between the unfunded system and the funded system is that in the personal savings account, retirement benefits depend on the funds accumulated in agents' personal savings account, and they are indexed at the agent's income. Not so at the average, lifetime average income. What is different in the personal savings account with annuitization is the fact that government also annuitizes funds accumulated at rate P, and it provides also a social insurance. We will see that social insurance is the model is calibrated in order to add a matching between the capital output ratio and the long-run US economy. In this study, we assume no growth, so we assume that technology growth rate is constant. And we now take a briefly look to the results by looking consumption equivalent, by looking at the last column of the table, which is the consumption, equivalence variation in percentage. It provides a measure of the welfare implication of a given policy. So analyzing the standard preferences condition, we can say that all the scenarios that presents payroll taxes equal 0 are the best in terms of retirement benefits and welfare implication, but focusing on the elimination and personal savings account with annuitization, but without the unfunded system, which is the last row, we can see that agents prefer prefer social security system which provides last two things, which provides also a social security system. And for what concerns self-control preferences, we show that the personal savings account, with annuitization are preferred to the first one, to the unfunded system, because they provide the same level of protection against temptation, and at the same time they increase the expected utility, the retirement benefits, and so they reach a positive general equilibrium effect. The difference that concern the temptation utility function allows to reach the definition of policy equivalence, because we can policy equivalence, which is well explained in the graph, in the slide. I'm done.
Okay. Any questions? Anyone? Okay, thank you. Oops.
Which is called sequential voting in large elections with multiple candidates, which is written by Frederick Hammer. This paper was mainly written because it was noticed that a common feature of many electoral systems is that some voters can cast their vote after observing other voters' choices. This, for example, happens in the US American presidential primaries, in which certain states vote after other states have voted. Furthermore, there's an empirical evidence that as the election progresses, electors tend to vote just for a couple of candidates, so the candidates who did poorly in the first round of voting are just eliminated from the consideration of the electors. And there are two possible explanations for this. The first one assumes that there is uncertainty about the candidate's quality, so second-period voters can infer those qualities from the early voting round, while the second assumes that there is perfect information about private preferences, but people like to vote strategically, so they don't want to waste a vote for a losing candidate, but they want to be pivotal. So the focus of this paper is in this second possible explanation, and hence strategic voting incentives in large sequential elections are analyzed. Here we assume that people can condition their vote on the results of the early voting round, and so they can have a better idea of how their vote is most likely to be pivotal. And the main result of this paper that I show you later is that voters almost always have an incentive to stop voting for their preferred choice in the second period, but they like to deviate and vote strategically. So the model here assumes that voters have perfect info about their private preferences, but there is no common knowledge about the distribution of those preferences. So each voter knows his private preferences, but he can't know the preferences of the others. And I think this is a very realistic assumption, because we are talking about large elections, so no one can know with certainty the distribution of the preferences. Then three candidates are assumed, they are A, B, and C, and there is a set of voters which goes from 1 to N, and each voter has strict preferences for candidates. Those preferences are IID draws from a distribution which can take on values A with probability PA, B with probability PB, and C with probability PC. And those probabilities are themselves draws from another density which is called F of PA and PB. And since we are in large elections, we assume that N tends to infinity, it's very large, so we can use the frequentist approach of probability. And so PA, PB, and PC approximate the vote shares received from the candidates. Now, firstly, the paper analyzed the simultaneous voting case, so we can have a comparison. We suppose that we just focus on a representative voter which has those preferences. So A is strictly preferred to B and B is strictly preferred to C. Hence, we can state that voting for A dominates voting for C. This happens because there are three possible cases in which our voter can be pivotal. The first case is the one in which A and B receives the same amount of votes in the first round. Not sorry, in the first round, just I suppose that A and B will receive the same amount of vote, so I can be pivotal between A and B and I decide to vote A. The second case is the one in which A and C receive the same amount of votes, which is the greater than the one received from B, so I can be pivotal between A and C, and given my preferences, I will vote for A. And the last and fourth case is the one B and C receive the same amount of votes, which is greater than the one received from A. And so I will vote for B given my preferences, so I will never vote for C. Thus, we can focus our attention on potential benefits of voting for A, with potential benefits of voting for B. And this inequality represents exactly this situation, because the first term represents the first situation that I told you, the second one, and so the right hand side represents the potential benefits of voting for B, while the left hand side represents the potential benefits of voting for A. So if that inequality holds, a voter which has those preferences will vote for A as the best response. And of course we can use the same reasoning to find other inequalities for voters who prefer B or C mostly, so we will get a system of three different inequalities which will be the conditions for a sincere voting equilibrium, which means an equilibrium in which all players vote for their preferred candidate. This, I think, it's a very important result also because it's not for a particular case, since there is no assumption about the density that we have used, so we can apply it to very general cases. Then we talk about the sequential voting, and first we analyze the second round, so the last round of voting. Here we assume that voters from n+1 to n vote strategically, after observing how voters 1 to n have voted. Here there can be two different cases. The first is in which the two most poorly performing candidate receive the same amount of votes in the early voting round, so there will be no incentive to deviate, and all second place voters will play sincerely. But if in the first round the most poorly performing candidate did significantly worse than the other two, since our voter will want to be pivotal and they don't want to waste a vote, they will stop to voting for that candidate, and so they will deviate and they will vote strategically. So we can state that there are situations in which it is almost never an equilibrium for all second period voters to vote for their preferred candidate. This also agrees with the empirical evidence that I told you, so they just tend to vote for a couple of candidates. This contrasts with simultaneous voting case, and so we can state, as the main result of this paper, that sequential structure has an impact on voter strategy, so it affects the outcome of the elections. But I think it is important to remark that this result relies on the assumption that we have made about that there is no common knowledge about distribution preferences, because if we had common knowledge, the result of the early voting round would carry no information, because, for example, it can happen that A is the most poorly performing candidate in the first round, but if there is common knowledge about the distribution of preferences, and I know that PA is very, very large with regard to the other two probabilities, voting for A still makes sense in the second round. Then we analyze the first round in sequential voting. Here we assume that second period voters will follow the equilibrium strategies that we have just seen, but we have the assumption that if a second period voter does not vote for her or his preferred candidate, he or she will vote for each of the other two candidates with probability 1/2, so randomly. And here the conclusion are that the conditions for a sincere voting equilibrium for all players of the first round are exactly the same that I told you in the sequential case, in the simultaneous case. They are exactly the integrals that I talked to you about. And again, this result is important because it's not for a particular case, because it does not really depend on the assumption that we have made about the randomness of voting, because these conditions just vary continuously with those probabilities. So we'll get different conditions, but conditions for sincere voting equilibrium will exist always. And lastly, the paper tries to apply these theoretical results to an applied work in a case in which there is a pre-election poll. Now, pre-election poll is not a votation, it's not an election, their votes are not varied, but we can think about it as a first round of voting because people can condition their vote on the results of this poll. So, ample respondents are asked about their private preferences, and hence the density that we use as a restricted formula that I decided not to report here because it's a bit of mathematical stuff, and I think that just the intuition is the important thing. Here we obtain exactly the same results. So if the two most poorly performing candidates receive the same amount of votes in the poll, voters in the election will vote sincerely because they have no incentive to deviate, because they can't be pivotal with their second preferred choice, and so they just vote sincerely. But if the least popular candidate is significantly worse than the other two, then again the second period voter will decide to vote strategically, and so they will deviate from the sincere voting equilibrium. And these results are also consistent with empirical evidence about US presidential primaries, which there is a lot of dates and other stuff reported in the paper, but anyway, the point is this, that they fit the reality, so they are good results, actually. And then we have our conclusions. The conclusion, what I told you, that sincere voting equilibrium conditions exist, and but second period voters will almost always vote strategically. And I just want to remark that results can be extended to the general case with more than 3 candidates and to general case with more than 2 voting rounds. So for example, if you have, let's say, I don't know, 100 voting rounds, the first round, there will be a sincere voting equilibrium if the conditions hold, the 3 integrals, the 3 inequalities. But from the second round onward, if we are in the case in which the most poorly performing candidate received the less votes with respect to the others, he will be eliminated from the consideration. So from the second round onward, just 2 candidates will compete each other for the election, in according to the empirical evidence that I talked to you about in the first slide. And I think this ends my presentation. So if there are some answers or questions, I would be delighted to answer.
Are there any questions? No? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Is it presented in the paper the general case, like the...
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Is it presented in the paper the general case you are talking about, or just
With more the 2 voting round? It's not formally presented, but just I think a few sentences about it. So just the stuff that I told you, because the conclusion is exactly the same of the 2 voting rounds. It doesn't change anything having more than 1 round if just one candidate very, very poor in the first round.
I mean, there is no restriction. They're saying that.
No, because these results can be extended to the any general case that you want, and the results will be exactly the same.
Okay.
So there is no more restrictions.
Another question. When they did the empirical evidence from US, it is a general case, right? Or just 2 rounds and many candidates?
Okay, it means on what you have in mind about 2 rounds, because there is not actually 2 rounds of voting. It's not that I vote like the week later that you vote. Just
no, I mean 2 seconds. Yeah.
Okay, there's like a lot of time gaps between a state and the other in US, so I can vote like in the evening, and with exit polls and other surveys or statistical method, I can know how other voters have voted, so I can decide. So it's not actually just that we split the voters.
Yeah, you're right. But I mean, in the second period. Okay. So is it a general case when they did the simulation, or they?
They studied the empirical evidences from the pre-election polls, because they know that if a candidate did very, very poor in the polls, in the pre-election polls, and if these results are valid, it means that that candidate must receive less vote than the support that he received in the poll. And the other 2 candidates must receive more votes than the support that they have received in the poll. And this empirical evidence confirm this, or they are in agreement with this. So,
thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much again. Yep. Any more questions?
Thank you.
Okay.
Configuration in public schools, and it was published in June 2010. And this paper looks at the effect of moving kids in grade 6 or 7 to middle school instead of having them in the same school throughout the first 8 years of education. And the results show that there are significant drops in academic achievement from moving them to middle school. So even though students on all different levels are affected, the ones who had lower initial results were affected even more. And these results persist throughout grade 8, which is the latest period of data that we have in this paper. They're also calculating losses of future earnings and show that there are substantial losses to society. So, in the late 20th century, middle schools became popular in the US, which is where this paper is written, in New York City. And they are popular in public but not private schools. And there's, in general, been a lot of studies made on subjects such as school quality and class sizes, but not so many studies on this subject. Although some previous studies have shown that middle school can result in lower results, higher suspension rates, and also lower self-esteem. So, as I said earlier, the study was conducted in New York City. It includes 5 cohorts who started grade 3 between 1998 and 2002. They are followed through grade 3 to grade 8. And the data includes demographics such as ethnicity, gender, language spoken at home, and free lunch status, which indicates if the family has restricted financial resources. It also includes standardized results in math and English tests, and suspension rates and absences. And students who either skipped the grade or did not take all the tests were excluded from the sample. And in this sample we have 61.7% in the K-5 school, where K means kindergarten, and 24.4% in the K-6 school, 7.4% in the K-8 school. And K-8 means that you never entered middle school, but you went to the same school throughout the first 8 years. So this is the group that we compare the other ones to. There's, as you can see, the numbers don't exactly add up. And this is because some students went to some other school, but it's very few, so they are not included in the comparison. So they are looking at the impact of attending middle school on academic achievement, and more specifically, they're looking at achievement in math and English, which is evaluated through standardized tests. And the results of these tests are normalized with a mean of 0 and standard deviation of 1, so that we can compare them easily. And in this regression, the alpha here is student fixed effects, meaning that they are individual characteristics, and the delta is grade fixed effects. The M is an indicator of where the student I entered middle school in grade G, and G lets M vary over time, which will let us see if the effect is different throughout the years, and it also allows us to see if there was a difference between students already before they started middle school. And the first run is regular OLS regression, but then in order to rule out the risk that there was something else happening in the student's life that made them change school, which could also affect their study results, they run a 2-stage least square with an instrument for middle school by using the terminal grade of the school that the student went to in 3rd grade. So for example, if G is 6, then if student I went to a school that ended after 5th grade, M would be 1. And using this method, the authors claim that there's really only one potential bias left, and that would be if there was some unobservable characteristic that causes the results in school to change at the exact same time as they are entering middle school. And even though it's hard to prove that this is not the case, there is no reason for us to believe that it is. And they're also conducting a survey for parents and students, asking them about satisfaction with the school they go to. And it shows that those who are in middle school experience lower levels of safety and pro-social behavior. So here we have the results, and this graph shows the math tests. So as you can see, we start at 0, and then we see the trend of how the students, how the results change. And this is compared to ones who did not enter middle school, so the K-8 students. And so those who started middle school in grade 6 underperformed in average 0.172 compared to the K-8 students, and the ones who entered in 7th grade by 0.098. And here's the same graph, but for the English tests. And here we can see that those entered in grade 6 and the low result of 0.14 standard deviation, and those entered in 7th grade by 0.088 lower. And the graphs both include the IB and the OLS regressions. Yeah.
And what is also interesting is that when we look at the results, we can see that those who went to K-5 or K-6 school, they had higher results before they were entering. So they had an upgoing trend the first years of the study, which then dropped when they entered middle school. So they were doing well before that. But after these 5 years, it turned out that the K-8 students, they were better than the K-6 students, and they were as good, about as good as the K-5 students. We can also see that absences increased, and suspension rates they rose exactly when they were entering school, but this effect faded out. And as I mentioned, they estimated lost future earnings, and they made a cost-benefit analysis where they used some assumptions from earlier studies, similar studies, and they could estimate that the cost would be around $25,000 per student. Even though this is just an estimation and it's hard to know the actual long-term effect, it's very likely that this exceeds the benefit from the money saved by putting everyone in the middle school. And there are some problems discussed in the paper as well. So first, we can only observe the local average treatment effect, meaning that we don't know if this would be the same result in some other city in the US. And also, it might be that parents who have kids that they think would benefit from being in a safe environment will put them in a K-8 school more often. And if this is the case, the result that we observe are actually lower than the ones than the actual ones. And it might be that the instrument is not perfectly correlated with the instrument variable, but according to this data, it seems that most parents have chosen the path for their kids' education already in third grade, so this should not be a problem either. It could be that we have attrition if some students move to a private school, or if some that they don't take the test because and that this might not be random. So to test this, they run an additional regression to include all of these students. They show the results in the paper. I don't have them here, but they are very similar to the original ones, so it shouldn't change the main point of the paper. Could it be that there's specific focus on math and English in these schools? Well, they also show that the course offerings are very similar, so this should not be the case either. So why do we believe that we have these results? Could it be that it is lower quality in the schools? Well, all of those schools are public and they have pretty much the same budget, and also there is no sign of the teacher quality being different. So could it be the act of switching school that harms students in this age? Because they are in a very sensitive age, and some of the earlier studies have shown that moving students could result in lower self-esteem. So this might be an explanation, but we are not able to test this with this data. And they're also discussing the relative age of students, that it might be easier to educate someone who is older compared to the other ones. They're not able to test this either. But what they do know is that cohort sizes are bigger in middle schools, and this could mean, they have the kids come from very different backgrounds, and they have diversified needs. So this might make it harder to educate them. They're also discussing peer stability, which means that peer stability is high if you have the same group from one year to another in your class, so you're comfortable and so on, which is a lot lower in middle school. But they cannot find any effect of this. They do find a small but significant negative effect on the cohort sizes. So this is part of the explanation. So the main point in this paper is that grade configuration matters, and not only school quality and class sizes. As I mentioned, we are not able to see the actual long-term effects since we only have the grades in the 8th grade, so we do not know what happens after that. But following some basic assumptions, we can estimate that it is likely that there are big costs for society of these low results, resulting in lower future earnings. So because of this, I think that this paper has some very interesting results. Thank you.
questions? Anyone? So I'll ask a question since we have a minute.
Sure.
There seems to be a trend. The gap seems to be reducing as time passes. Do they comment on that? So it's very big after the first year.
Yeah, they comment on that, and it seems that it's biggest when they are entering.
But then, do they expect it to disappear eventually?
No,
they don't say that.
They do not say
Okay.
that. So there is still a difference, but it seems to be,
Yeah. Anyway, they don't.
So, but you can see here, like that it is upgoing first, and then it's dropping. Very much exactly when they are entering. For both of them.
Okay. Any more questions? Thank you then. Okay, go ahead.
Hi guys, I'm Lorenzo Bossoli from the Master of Science, and today I'm going to present this very interesting article about a very hot topic in policy debate, because it's about how much a private market should we allow in a public good provision, like health or education. So you're looking now at the Canada flag, because the authors of this article, Luffman and Myers from the Simon Fraser University in Canada, cite this country as an example of a one-tier market, when private providers are not allowed to perform like surgery or such kind of operations. And in this article we will find out, through a very simple game theoretical model with no asymmetry information or behavioral elements, that it is possible for a slippery slope argument to be made. Namely, it is possible not to allow private market to exist for the fear that the tax rate through a majority voting system will go low until the point that the public sector will suddenly collapse. So we have the three main intuitions in this paper that are, in general, like we see in reality around us, two-tier systems are preferred to one-tier systems. And this is driven by two very simple considerations that are: there is an adjustment effect, so richer people can adjust their favorite level of consumption of the public good of the private market, and this is good for them. But on the other hand, there is a redistribution effect. So rich people that opt out public service still pay taxes, and this is an advantage for poor people that use public good. So we also see that a two-tier equilibrium can be zero taxation, so zero public service, and in this case the one-tier system is possibly majority preferred. So we take a brief review of past literature. We have the usual, I would say, papers, Stiglitz about the market failure of a private education system, which I really advise you to read because it's very interesting. Then Besley and Colty in 1991 favored the two-tier system over the one-tier system for welfare reasons, but they didn't address the public choice aspect. And the well-known Apple and Romero series of papers about end against the middle is the straightforward background of these papers, because they share the same mathematical model. So here we have the utility function of each household in this country is the same, and the only heterogeneity is due to the income, which is distributed as Fy. And prices are normalized to 1 for consumption of both a public and a private good. The budget constraint for the private good, then it is only the disposable income after taxation, while for the public good, we have the government budget constraint, that is total revenue for taxation with exogenous income, divided by the number of users, which is a function of taxation, which is the only degree of freedom, and parameter alpha, which is indicating the degree of rivalry of the good. When alpha is equal to 0, people don't care about the number of users, because the denominator is equal to 1. And this will be important if you want to read the paper for further analysis. Then we have the one-tier and the two-tier equilibria, and we will compare them to predict what household will choose in a majority voting between the two systems. In a one-tier system, the equilibrium is given by the budget constraints put into the utility function, and we have the marginal rate substitution must be equal to the ratio between the family income and the average income, so redistribution is important. And we will do two very important assumptions that are not so tragic, I would say, because they are compatible, for example, with a constant elasticity substitution utility function within the public and the private good. So we will say that indirect utility function with respect to taxation is single peaked, and that the favored level of taxation is monotonic with respect to income. We don't care now if it is increasing or decreasing, because it depends if the private or the public good are substitutes and complements. So if we assume monotonic preferences and single peak preferences, obviously the median income voter will win, because we have the median voter theorem, and preferences are ordered according to the income. So we call it T preferred M. The preferred tax rate of a median earner is the one that will arise as an equilibrium in the majority voting. Now we switch. We switch to the two-tier system, which is a two-stage game where household plays backward induction and play the sub-game perfect Nash equilibrium. And first of all, we analyze the second stage, and there are households opting out or not public system. So, as we can remember, if you remember from the Apple and Romero paper, each household has a T-hat level of taxation under which they will give up public system. This may sound counterintuitive, but if taxation are too low, they have a lot of disposable income to spend on the private market, and on the other hand, the redistribution effect is very low due to low quality and low expenditure. So each household at some points will prefer to go private. And in this case, until the threshold, the indirect utility function is strictly decreasing, linearly decreasing in this case. And it's obvious that paying more taxes without using public service is only a cost. Then we have a double peak utility function, which is a real mess when you come to analyze the result of voting. With a second peak, that is T star, that is obtained through maximization problem like in the previous case, but with a different outcome. Well, we now have to make a very important assumption. We will focus on the case when the preferred level of taxation is increasing with respect to income. You find on the paper the other case, which is very simple and not so interesting. So we have that richer people will like an even bigger, an always bigger level of taxation until if the threshold is reached. Below their threshold, which is increasing with respect to income, as we see, the richer the family, the higher the threshold, they will want zero taxation. This is giving an ends against the middle dynamics, like in the Apple and Romero paper we can read. And so, let's talk about the majority equilibrium. I will put it briefly because it's less complicated. So, a voting equilibrium cannot be lower than the median earner threshold, because in this case, the median earner will go out public system, and so will do the richest half of population, and the equilibrium will be zero. On the other hand, with similar argument, equilibrium, if it's positive, cannot be above the median earner preferred level, because otherwise poor people will go to T star M. So we can represent in this way. We'll go there after if we have time, because it's very interesting how equilibrium is characterized. And this point is the sufficient condition equilibrium, which we must then compare in a majority voting with the T equal to 0 equilibrium, which is the purely private system. So let's come to sum up the result. If an equilibrium with T major than 0 exists, it is evolutionarily stable. So whichever is the initial condition, household we set up to go to two-tier system with t major than 0. However, if t equal to 0 is the equilibrium, the lower and the middle class can make a coalition to stop the transition from a one-tier to a two-tier system. And this is due to a slippery slope argument, that is, taxes will slowly go down until the level of collapse. So this is our take-home message. I will do a nerd reference because I'm a nerd, so as Lemon Stickett said in the series of important events, like handshakes, house pets, and road carrots, many things are preferably not slippery. So a slippery slope can be rational, is not only an ideological argument about public policy, but it is an extreme case. If you want, we can see how equilibrium is characterized, if we have time, I don't know.
You are the presenter and you have time, 2 minutes or so,
Okay.
a bit more, 3 minutes.
We have two functions. There are FLT and FHT. This is the percentage of richer half of people that will give up public education in the upper part. We give it in the lower part. Okay? So all people that are giving up will vote t equal to 0, while all richer people will have an optimum risk above the upper bound of t star m. On the other hand, we can say the opposite consideration for the lower income people, but with respect to their preferred rate. So we have all the people that are preferred rate below t and above t. So all that people will choose to go down taxation, and all that people to one will choose to go up taxation. When the two curves intersect, we have the equilibrium. That is not equal to 1 because some people will always give up, even if they're rich, under the T star M level. Is a very brief explanation. I strongly advise you to look at the paper because it's a very simple but interesting article. And this was everything.
Thank you very much. Any questions, anyone? Okay, then.
Long-term care insurance and Huntington disease. It has been originally published in 2009, but the results still hold in the current area of public and health economics. So the article will show two different things. So we have two completely different sides of the article. One is the fact that by analyzing Huntington disease effect on long-term care insurance market, we prove the hypothesis of adverse selection. And the second striking result is the fact that if more than 3% of the population has the disease, and this is private information, the insurance market will be better off by a policy intervention that would allow for private knowledge to become public. So if more than 3% of the population has the disease, there is a Pareto improvement in switching the private information system. First of all, we need to define what is adverse selection. Adverse selection comes from the concept of information asymmetry. Information asymmetry is defined as a situation in which agents in a potential economic transaction do not have the same information about the quality of the good being transacted. In our specific case, we are speaking about the healthy or unhealthy state of the individual. So if the individual is affected by Huntington disease, might be considered to be unhealthy, while if the individual is not affected by Huntington disease, will be considered healthy. So this may be a source of adverse selection, and we are going to prove that there is indeed adverse selection in the genetic information market. So first of all, we need to focus on what is Huntington disease. Huntington disease is such that you have a 50% chance of having the disease if one of your parents has it. So you are born with the concept that you might have the disease with a 50% probability. There is also a test which is completely available in the market, which is completely sure, which tells you whether you have the disease or not. Another important concept for the disease is the fact that it requires a lot of medical care for many years. The disease takes people which are between 30 to 50 years old, and it takes around 20 years to kill them, and it's very painful because it affects both the mental and the physical state of the individuals. And the last 6 to 10 years of the life of these individuals is very painful and requires a lot of medical attention. Specifically, 70 to 80% of the individuals end up in nursing home for around 6 years. there is no cure which is available yet, which is very unlikely for these individuals, but is a good side of our study because there is no modification in the healthy or unhealthy state of the individuals. We will use two different data sets. One is for people which are affected by HD, which is the FARO study, which started in 1999 and ended up in 2009. And the other study is the health and retirement survey, which is compared to the FARO study in the sense that people in the health and retirement survey are considered generally to be healthy, and people in the FARO study are considered to have a chance of being sick. So why should someone which is affected or might be affected by Huntington's disease have a higher level of demand function for healthcare insurance? The reason is the following one, because they will have a load which is positive. So for every dollar that you pay, if you have a 50% of having the disease, you will get $2.4. If you have the disease for sure, you will get $4 for every dollar that you pay in. But the reason for an individual in the general population to have the health insurance is not the fact that you have a positive load, so you would have a positive return, is indeed the fact that they are risk averse. So we count on risk aversion of individuals to support a model for pooling equilibrium, which considers also people which are sick. So in our framework, the reason for the individual to ask for health insurance is the following one, because they want to maximize their expected utility. Their expected utility is given by their utility when they are healthy, which is given by YH, which is the consumption when they are healthy, minus gamma, which is the money that they pay for every unit of insurance, which is multiplied by T, which is the amount of insurance that they ask in the insurance market. We also sum up their utility when they are sick, which is given by the consumption when they are sick, plus the amount of insurance that they bought, which is multiplied by the probability of being sick. There is no indication that the insurance market acts on whether individuals have a higher probability of being sick, so they all face the same price gamma. When we take the derivative with respect to T, the derivative with respect to Q, we are asking ourselves if your demand function changes depending on whether you have the higher probability of having the disease. And if this is greater than 0, we prove indeed that there is adverse selection. And okay, these are statistics from the data that I told you about. You can see here that we have the general population from the HRS, and we see that they have a demand function which is lower than the individuals from the FAROS, is lower than the individuals from the FAROS if they have a 50% chance of having a disease because they did not take the test. In the case they took the test and the result is positive, 1 out of 2 of them will require a long-term care health insurance. But in the case they took the test and the result is negative, they still have a higher demand function. And the reason is the following one, because in our sample there are only 32 individuals which took the test and don't carry the mutation. So our data is shrink to the minimum, so we don't have enough data to make inference on this difference, right? But we can see that in a better way when we use our regressions. Our regression framework is the following one. The first regression states that basically whether the fact that you might have the Huntington disease should influence your demand function. So own is your probability of owning the insurance. In the second regression, your probability of owning the insurance is depending on different variables. Beta 2 states that you took the test and the result is positive. Beta 3, you took the test and the result is negative. But the fourth case is the case in which you took the test but did not reveal the result to the scientist. So the scientist doesn't know whether the result is positive or negative, and we don't know what to expect in this case. But in my opinion, the most interesting one is the last one, because it extends a time concept. So it allows for individuals to act on the result of the test. The fourth one is an immediate result. So you took the test, the result is negative, but is your demand for insurance going to change immediately? Probably not. You will need some time to act on that. And this is what is happening here, because this is the chance you took the test before this period. This is the chance you took the test before this period and the result is negative. And these are different chances you took the test, did not reveal the result to the scientist in 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and the current year. And these are the results. So interpret the first column and the second column with the first regression, right there. And you will see that with a great statistical significance, if indeed you act with the 50% chance of having the disease, you will ask for a greater level of insurance. In the third column, we have the second regression. If you remember, is the current period. There is no change in your demand if you took the test and the result is negative, because you are similar to an individual in the general population. But if you took the test and the result is positive, with statistical significance of 95%, we have that you will indeed ask for a greater level of insurance. In the fourth regression, we can clearly see that the only statistical significant result with 99% of safeness is the fact that you took the test before this period and the result is indeed positive, and you will act on this information. We can now switch to the second part of the article, which is about equilibrium. We are trying to see if it is possible for the insurance market to stay in the way it is right now. So the fact that you ask for insurance, but the insurer doesn't know whether you have the Huntington's disease or not. We define two different types of equilibrium. The pooling equilibrium is a contract that attracts both healthy and unhealthy customers and simultaneously satisfies the equilibrium condition. A separating equilibrium is what would happen in the case the information gets spread, so the insurer can act on that. It is a set of two contracts that satisfies the equilibrium condition, one that attracts healthy and one that attracts unhealthy customers. And in our model, we first define the load as the difference between what you get from the insurer in the case you're sick, minus what you pay for the insurance. So basically, you will have that if you fix the premium pi, we expect TS to be greater than TH, in the sense that we expect sick individuals to have a higher return than healthy individuals. We map this into real demand functions, real data, and we get that the general population will stop asking for health insurance in the case their return is only 0.6 for every dollar that they pay in, which is a very low result. So the authors are very keen in admitting the fact that this might be true, so they use lower results. So act as if this was 0.7, okay? The insurer will want to maximize revenue minus cost. Revenue minus cost will depend on the prices that they use for the demand functions, but also they will depend on the amount of healthy and unhealthy individuals. Alpha is the amount of people which are unhealthy in the total population. So it's a percentage level, which allows us to use 1 minus alpha to define the amount of healthy individuals. We map this into demand functions, and we get to the result that we said at the beginning, which is the fact that if more than 0.3% of the population has the disease, there is no price which would allow for a pooling equilibrium, and it would be better for to switch to a separating equilibrium. So is it what is going to happen? We extend the result that we used for Huntington disease to Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's diseases, and other genetic endowment diseases in order to understand whether this might be a problem or not. And our result is the fact that at the current stage of these tests, this is not a problem, because the Parkinson's disease doesn't allow for commercially available tests yet, because they are not very sure. Alzheimer's disease also, and ALS only affects a low amount of individuals. And basically, the current state of the genetic information is not such that this might be a problem. Another solution, other than the one which is proposed by the authors, is a classic solution, which is switching from the American healthcare system to the universal healthcare system, which is basically forcing healthy people to pay for sick individuals, which is another second best equilibrium for a public group. I thank you for your attention, and if you have any question.
Any questions? So I'll ask a question, but you have to be quick with your answer. So you said 3% is the point
Yes.
at which, but that's very high for Huntington disease. What's the prevalence? I can see that 0.01%.
Yes.
So we're a long way from
Yes.
being a problem. Okay.
That might become an issue
Right.
if the
If it be-
population which is affected by Alzheimer's disease is so high
Yeah.
that basically they take the test they are going to get old and their weight on the insurance market will be so high that their prevalence won't allow. But also consider that the article is from 2009 and the insurance market changed a little bit because a lot of people are taking the insurance.
There's Obamacare.
The return that I stated here, minus 0.18. The thing is, you take the insurance and you know you have the insurance, so you ask for many tests until you find a doctor which tells you, okay, you can take the test because you are acting as if you are losing money, right? And so it should be interesting to remake the same study in the current area, also because the study is from 2009 and the amount of individuals which are in the Faros and did not take the test is very high. But you can see that in 2009, when the studies has ended and has been published, we don't have any more people who are untested. We know whether you have the disease or not. So we can put you in the situation where you took the test and carried the HD mutation because we know that you have the HD. Some time has passed, and we should know. We should have a better understanding of this beta 2 and this beta 3.
Okay. Any more? Okay. Thank you very much. Stop this.
Diversity and Redistribution, and it was written in 2005 by Fernandez and Levy. The topic is the analysis of the relationship occurring between case diversity and the capability of the poor to extract resources from the rich through the taxation system. In particular, how do class and preference conflicts interact? The main intuitions behind these questions are two. The first one is that at the present of many narrow interests, there is an incentive for the rich to ally with specific interest groups with the aim of lowering an overall tax burden. While the second intuition is that because of this huge heterogeneity in tastes, the only solution of the political process would be to have a general redistribution. The paper develops through a game in which there are different individuals that form coalitions. These coalitions are represented into the political process by parties that propose different platforms, where by platform we mean a different bundle of taxation. Then there is the election, and of course the winning policy is chosen by the majority rule. The main result of the paper is that as diversity in tastes increases, the equilibrium policies of the game moves in favor of the special interest groups, and it goes against the general interest of the poor. They are made worse off. Nevertheless, there is a critical threshold in the sense that there is a certain level of diversity at which the coalition between interest groups and rich will collapse, and the solution of the model will be the general redistribution. The model, there are two different kinds of agents, poor and rich, but even if the poor represents more than a half of the population, they are split into different groups. The first one is made of individuals belonging to special interest groups, and the other who do not belong to them. As a consequence, there are two different kinds of goods. One is X and is simple consumption goods, while the second kind is a set of targeted goods. From the utility function here, it is possible to see that people belonging to special interest groups derive their utility both from the consumption good X and from the quantity Q of the targeted good I, so the corresponding targeted goods. Government is allowed to propose two different kinds of taxes. Both are progressive are proportional in income, and one is the redistributive tax style, and the second kind are a set of taxes TI, which are supposed to finance a specific targeted good I.
From these formulas, the indirect utility functions, we can see that the utility of people belonging to special interest groups derives from the net income, the amount of redistribution, because mu, is the average income, then less distortion deriving from the taxation system, plus the utility deriving from the quantity of the targeted group I provided by the system. Indeed, this term is not present in the indirect utility function of people belonging to non-special interest groups. Well, the political process, each party that represents different coalitions is represented in the political process by a politician. There is just one politician for each party, and the rest of the individuals are just voters. As I have already said, each party proposes different platforms, and the platform is chosen through this election. But let's try to focus on candidate for equilibrium. There must be some characteristics for candidate for equilibrium. They have to be best responses, in the sense that there must be no alternative within the proposals for the people belonging to a specific party that would make them better off. These policies must be stable, in the sense that there must be no incentive within member of the party to split from their original party and form sub-coalitions that would make them better off at the end of the game. And then there is the breaking rule. That means that if the set of winning policies would be the same at the presence and at the absence of the platform proposed by its own party, the party chooses not to propose such a platform. So, as it follows from the first intuition that I have already mentioned, there are two pure strategy equilibria of the game. In the first, both manage to extract resources from the rich, and this happens in the form of general redistribution, while the second possible equilibria involves the poor divided by this process, and there is a lower level of general redistribution, but there is a positive quantity of targeted goods provided by the system. The ideal points of each of the three groups presented in the game. The rich, of course, would prefer a situation in which there is no taxation at all. The non-interest groups, they are all poor, would prefer a situation in which there is only general redistribution, of course, and the star means that it is an optimal level. While for the interest groups, specific interest groups, and they are poor too, there are both general redistribution and targeted goods. Okay, this is a proposition resulting from the model, and it says, as follows from the two equilibria that I have already shown, that the coalition that would lead to such equilibrium are either a situation in which just P0, which are the poor belonging to non-special interest groups, wins, or there is a coalition made up of specific interest groups and rich that ally and propose a platform. But this coalition has to be minimal. In what sense this coalition has to be minimal? Because in terms of taxation, of course, it is costly to make an agreement with more and more interest groups. And so the more groups are present within the coalition, the less costly it is. And the second aspect is why the coalition, the winning coalition, cannot contain P0, which is the group of poor with non-special interest. Because it is intuitive to realize that every member of the society would prefer general redistribution to any other platform proposed which is not its own. And so a winning coalition in which P0 is present has an incentive to split from the winning coalition because it would have the support of all the other members of the society. Let's try to analyze the situation to a diagram. Here we have on the x-axis T, which is the summation of all the taxes Ti, and then we have on the y-axis tau, which is the redistributive tax. And this Q equals 0 line is the locus of the graph in which we have no amount of targeted goods provided by the system. This WR and WP are the typical indifferent curves of poor belonging to the coalitions and of rich. Okay, the Pareto set. The policies that are efficient in this game are those in bold in the graphs, and so they mirror the two equilibria that I have just shown. So this set on the y-axis represents the equilibria in which there is just general redistribution, while the second set is at the presence of positive amount of targeted goods, and it derives from the tangency condition that we all know very well. And we want to focus on this second kind of equilibrium. So these two curves, R and P, are the indifference curve of rich and poor within the coalition that would make the members of these groups indifferent between maximum redistribution policy and that would make them indifferent and the policy proposed by such a coalition. So the shaded area of the graphs would make both of them better off with respect of general redistribution policy. The intersection between the Pareto set and this shaded area is called winning interior policy and would lead to the equilibrium of the game. Let's now focus on a case in which there is an increase in taste diversity, which means that there are more interest groups, and so at each policy bundle, each interest groups receive less amount of quantity Qi of the targeted good they are interested in. Increasing the diversity would mean to shift on the left the P curve, so the curve that represents indifference condition with maximum general distribution, and as a consequence, the width becomes smaller and it slopes a little bit downward. This means that as diversity increases, this width becomes even always smaller and smaller, and there is a certain level of n, such that which are the number of the interest groups within the model, for which there is the unique equilibrium for the game would be the general redistribution, because there, of course, there will be no intersection at all, no such a platform that would make the members of the coalition better off with respect to general redistribution. And something about the conclusion. The main fact is that such an analysis can be fruitful in the sense that inquiring the relation between diversity of income and political outcome could be something that could be useful in the sense of analyzing the political process, even if this is not actually the real purpose of the paper. There have been some empirical analysis by other authors, and these results are consistent with the result of this paper. Indeed, if we consider USA, there has been found a negative correlation across country countries between ethnic fragmentation and provision of public goods. So the more there are different ethnic groups within a nation, the less public goods such as education and infrastructure are provided. But of course, this paper goes a little bit further, because the main result is that there is this level of diversity at which the coalition between the rich and the interest groups will collapse, and general redistribution is embraced as a solution. And something interesting could be the fact that there are possible extensions for the model that could concern, for example, different electoral rules and all form of governments and so on. And that's it. That was my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, any questions? Yeah.
Sorry, so the main purpose of this paper, if we increase the diversity, we will reach a solution when we get like general distribution, right?
Yeah, the fact is not actually to point out which is this level, but the fact that there is the negative correlation pointed out by other authors exist, but there is a certain threshold, critical threshold, at which this collision breaks out.
Okay, well, that's the end of the course. So for those of you who are, let me stop this.